Hey, good morning, everybody. We're back here with chapter 15 of An Esoteric Cosmology by Rudolf Steiner. The website I'm using for these readings is rsarchive.org, which is an amazing website if you like Rudolf Steiner's works. You can find probably not all of them, but a huge storehouse of Rudolf Steiner's writings at rsarchive.org. Also, if you're interested in Rudolf Steiner, if you're interested in more of his stuff, go to the YouTube channel. It's called Rudolf Steiner Press Audio, and it has, probably hundreds of full-length Rudolf Steiner audiobooks. It's a really awesome YouTube channel. So for those of you who are interested, I would definitely suggest checking that out. Before I get going here, on the topic of this 15th chapter, I want to talk a little bit about it. This is something that would have helped me out, I know, when I was first starting to study this stuff, if I would have known some of these underlying pieces of lore. So, when you're studying the alchemical tradition, you're definitely going to hear a lot about the sun, the moon, Saturn, and then all these different various aspects of planetary arrangements and whatnot. Excuse me. So, if you go back to the very beginning, Blavatsky, in her volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine, which is called Cosmogenesis, it's all about this. It's all about how the cosmos itself came into being. And that's a very important aspect of this, because in the same way that the cosmos came into being, we also came into being. We are like a reflection of that exact template. So it's important to understand that. That's the whole as above, so below concept, is that the forces behind the generation of the cosmos are the same forces behind the generation of man, right? We're emanations of it. The point I want to make here is, when you hear about Saturn, the sun, and the moon, it's really easy to think about Saturn, the planet, the sun that we see in the sky, and the moon as we know it today, as a satellite of the Earth. However, when you trace this stuff back, that is not what the original meanings were. The original meanings of Saturn, Sun, and Moon were the first planetary conditions of Earth. Let me say that again, because I know it can be kind of hard to wrap your head around. Saturn, Sun, and Moon were the original 3 incarnations of our Earth. So before our Earth was the Earth that we know today, before it was solid matter, if you trace it back into primordial antiquity, the very first condition that were the very first conditions that were stirring, they weren't even visible yet. They were just basically energy vortices and, mind powers, if you will, which were generating what would become our Earth. But that first period where there was nothing but darkness and slight heat, warmth, that dark warmth, which was the encapsulation of all human souls, as they say in the lore, that was the seed of our Earth. And we've evolved right along with our Earth. But the first period of Earth's incarnation was called Saturn. I'm just giving you what the esoteric lore says. This will definitely help you in your later studies, because we need to understand these as principles and not necessarily as physical objects. Like the planet Saturn has the same characteristics and projects those same characteristics as the original Saturn, but it's not the Saturn they were talking about. Although these things do all correlate. Our sun was not necessarily the sun they were talking about when you hear of old sun. Our moon, which is the satellite of Earth out there, is not the moon spoken of in the lore when you go back to the beginning. So that can be a little bit confusing. But what we're talking about here are planetary arrangements, if you will, really just one planetary arrangement, because it's speaking of the evolution of the Earth that we now stand on. We're now in what they call the Earth period, but it went Saturn period, Sun period, Moon period. Now we're in the Earth period of Earth. This is the period where everything comes together. We're at the height or depth of crystallization, if you want to call it that. Things have evolved through spirit down into matter. That's involution. And now we're getting ready to evolve. So it goes involution, evolution. It's like a big V. We're now at the bottom point where the V makes the point. That's where we are now in evolution of the cosmos and in the evolution of humanity. We've evolved right along with the Earth. Essentially, we're inseparable from this evolutionary process. So, Saturn period, Sun period, that's when the sun, not the sun as we know it now, but that's when the sun emerged out of the Saturn period. That was the father and the son. Then the moon period, which was the third incarnation of Earth, that was the moon period that represents the Holy Spirit. See, this is where we get our original conception of the Trinity. It's from the three periods that Earth went through in its birth. So you've got the Saturn, the Sun, the Moon period, and these all correlate to what eventually would be Saturn, the Sun, and the Moon that we know now. They share the same energies. But just to try, not everybody's going to really fully understand that right off the bat. That's fine. Just like I said, file this stuff away in your memory and then come back to it at a later time. Because at a higher spiral of that spiral staircase we talked about, you'll come back around to it and then it will plug in and it'll make sense. But that's important to say, I think, off the bat, is that Saturn, Sun, and Moon are not necessarily the Saturn, Sun, and Moon that you think of nowadays. We got to remember this is ancient and this is evolutionary. So think of it as periods of evolution and how we've also evolved right along with it. It's quite fascinating. And when you follow this philosophy to its end, you realize that a lot of the metaphors that you've come to understand, like I was big on metaphor and symbolism. That's how I first started this study, was getting into, biblical symbolism, Masonic symbolism, and trying to understand it from that perspective first, where I think if I would have understood the lore from the beginning at first, then a lot of the things that I thought were metaphor may have made more sense to me. I may have had a deeper understanding earlier than what I did. But as you keep going with this stuff, yeah, you'll notice a lot of stuff is metaphor and symbolism. But then the deeper you go and you start realizing that this whole evolutionary process is you're just interconnected with it, then you start realizing, like, wow, what I thought was metaphor is on one level, but then you realize this deeper reality to it, and you're like, wow, it's actually literal true. I can't get into that too much. I mean, that's just an experience you have to have for yourself. But when you realize we are literal projections of the cosmos, like we're emanations of the cosmos, not in a fantastical or metaphorical way, in a literal way. It's literally true. You are like a stamp or an imprint of the cosmos. I mean, I could talk about it all day, but I'd just be talking in circles. And we need to get started on this chapter. I've already wasted 10 minutes of your time talking, so let's jump into this. Okay, An Esoteric Cosmology, chapter 15, The Evolution of Planets and Earth. To gain an idea of this evolution, we must have recourse not to abstractions, but to pictures. For pictures have a living, creative quality that is not contained in the pure idea. The picture is a symbol in one world, but corresponds to a higher reality in another world. Let me say that again. The picture is a symbol in one world, but corresponds to a reality in a higher world. We know that before developing to its present stage, our Earth passed through a phase called the Old Moon period. But this Old Moon phase of evolution is not to be confused with the satellite we now see in the sky, nor to any other planet that astronomy might ever discover. The heavenly bodies visible today are bodies which have been mineralized. The human eye can only see objects which contain mineral elements and reflect the light. In other words, objects which have a physical body. When the occultist speaks of the mineral kingdom, he is not merely referring to the stones, but to the milieu at the central core of which the consciousness of man unfolds. Many scholars regard living beings as mere machines and reject the idea of a vital force. This mentality is a result of the fact that our organism is unable, really, to behold life. The occultist, on the other hand, says that in our age, man lives in the mineral world. Excuse me. Our bodies are mineral. We are made up of the minerals which make up the cosmos. And it's no wonder that that is how it is. Think of the human eye. It is a highly complicated mechanism, a kind of dark chamber with the pupil as a window and the crystalline as a lens. The whole body of man is composed of a number of physical organs, equally delicate and complicated. The ear is like a harpsichord, with a keyboard and fibers for strings. And the same may be said of every sense organ. The consciousness of modern man is only awakened if connection is established with his physical or mineral body. True, it awakens first in the physical world, but it must nonetheless gradually light up in other members of man's being. In the member that is constituted by the life forces, the plant nature of man, in the member that is chiefly dominated by the forces of feeling, the animal nature, and finally, in the ego. Truth to tell, man only knows what is mineral in the universe. He does not know the essential laws underlying the animal's life of instinct and feeling, and the growing of plants. He simply sees their physical expressions. Try to conceive a plant in a superphysical existence, having lost its mineral substance. It would be invisible to our physical eyes. It would be invisible to our physical eyes. But even though man knows only the mineral, at least he has it in his power. He works it, molds it, smelts it, and combines it. He fashions the face of the earth anew. He is able to do this in our age with the help of machines. If we go back to remote historic ages, when as yet no human hand had been laid on the earth, we find it as it issued from the hands of the gods. But ever since man began to exercise control over the mineral kingdom, the earth has been changing, and we may foresee an age when the whole face of the earth, which at the beginning was the work of the gods, will have received the stamp imparted by the hand of man. In the beginning, form was given to all created things by the gods. This power of giving form has passed from the gods to men, insofar as the mineral kingdom is concerned. In ancient traditions, it was taught that man must accomplish the task of transforming the earth in fulfillment of a threefold goal, namely, the realization of truth, beauty, and goodness. It is for man to make the earth into a temple of truth, beauty, and goodness, and then those who come after him will look upon his work as we now look upon the mineral world which came forth from the hands of the gods. Neither cathedrals nor machines have been built in vain. The gods have given form to crystal, which we extract from the earth, just as we build our monuments and our machines. Just as, in the past, the gods created the mineral world from a chaotic mass, so our cathedrals, inventions, and even our institutions are the germs from which a future world will come to birth. Having transformed the mineral world, man will learn to transform the plants. This denotes a higher power. Today, man erects buildings. In future times, he will be able to create and give shape to plant life by working upon plant substance. At a still higher stage, he will give form not only to living beings, but to conscious beings. He will have power over animal life. When he has reached the stage of being able to reproduce his like by an act of conscious will, he will accomplish, at a higher level, what he accomplishes today in the mineral world. The germ of this sublime power of generation, cleansed of all element of sensuality, is the Word. Man became a conscious being when he drew his first breath. Consciousness will reach its stage of perfection when he is able to pour into the words he utters the same creative power with which his thought is endowed today. In this age, it is only words that he communicates to the air. When he has reached a stage of higher creative consciousness, he will be able to communicate images to the air. The word will then be an imagination, wholly permeated with life. In giving body to these images, he will be giving body to the word which bears and sustains the image. When we no longer simply embody our thoughts in objects, as for instance, when we make a watch, but give body to these images, they will live. And when man knows how to impart life to what is highest in him, these images will lead a real, actual existence, comparable to an animal existence. At the highest stage of evolution, man will thus be able, finally, to reproduce his own being. At the end of the process of the earth's transformation, the whole atmosphere will resound with the power of the word. Thus, man must evolve to a stage where he will have the power to mold his environment in the image of his inner being. The initiate only precedes him along this path. It is evident that the earth today cannot produce human bodies such as will be produced at the final stage of evolution. When that final stage has come, these bodies will be fit expression of the Logos. These bodies will be a fit expression of the Logos. The one great messenger, he alone who manifested in a human body like our own, this power of the Logos, is Christ. He came at the central turning point of evolution to reveal its goal. And now let us inquire into the form in which the spirit of man lived before this spirit entered into him by way of the breath. The earth is a reincarnation of an earlier planet, of the old moon. In this lunar period of evolution, the pure mineral did not exist. The planetary body was composed of a substance somewhat akin to the nature of a wood substance midway between the mineral and the plant. Its surface was not hard like the mineral, indeed, it was likened to turf. It brought forth beings by nature half plant, half mollusk, and was inhabited by a third kingdom of beings at a stage of existence midway between the human being and the animal. These beings were endowed with a dreamlike, imaginative consciousness. We can envisage the kind of matter of which their bodies were composed by thinking of the nerve substance of the crayfish. This matter densified to become the substance of which the brain is now composed. On the old moon, this matter remained in a more fluid state, but on Earth it required a protective sheath of bone, the skull. In this sense, all the substances of which we are composed are extracts of the macrocosm. All this preparatory activity in the universe was necessary in order that the ego might descend into man. We have heard that man was only ready to receive the germ of his ego when, on Earth, he began to breathe the air around him. Did he then breathe on the moon? The further we go back in the periods of evolution, the higher the temperature. Atlantis was bathed in hot vapors. In earlier times still, the air was pure warmth. Before that again, fire. Fire was there in the place of air. The Lemurians breathed fire. That is why it is said in the occult writings that the first teachers of men were the fire spirits, or the spirits of fire. When physical man appeared on Earth, air became his element of life. Having some trouble here, guys. I apologize. Not awake enough. I probably need to drink another coffee. Okay, when physical man appeared on Earth, air became his element of life. But man changes this air, in that he transforms it into carbonic acid, and the breathing process has thus caused the materialization of our globe to descend still 1 degree lower. The equilibrium is restored by the plant world. In times to come, the physical body will disappear. Man and the earth will live as astral forms. Physical substance destroys itself by its own forces, but before this metamorphosis comes about, a cosmic night will fall, just as a previous cosmic night marked the transition of the old moon evolution to that of our present Earth. The atmosphere of the moon contained nitrogen, just as today the atmosphere of the Earth contains oxygen, and it was the predominance of nitrogen which brought about the end of the old moon period and the onset of the cosmic night. The cyanides on Earth are survivals from the conditions existing at the final stages of the old moon evolution. That is why they have a destructive effect on the Earth, for the Earth is not their proper sphere. They are the poisonous remains of life in another age. Animal man, as he lived on the old moon, is thus the ancestor of earthly physical man. The spirit within man is the offspring of the spirits of fire in the lunar period. The beings who, on the old moon, were incarnate in the fire, incarnated on Earth in the air. But now, has anything of the action of these spirits of fire remained in man? On the old moon, living beings had no warm blood. What was it that gave rise to the warmth of the blood, and as a consequence, to the life of passions? The fire which was inbreathed by the beings of the old moon, and which lives again on earth in their blood. And the spirit of the air surrounds the body which contains the heritage of the old moon evolution, namely, the warmth of the blood, the brain, the spinal fluid, and the nerves. These examples serve to show that a close study of the transformation of substances is required before we can begin to understand the great processes of metamorphosis which took place during the earlier periods of the Earth's evolution. At a stage still earlier than that of the old moon, the planetary sphere, which has now become our Earth, had a body composed merely of gaseous substance. Before that, again, we can only speak of a body of sound. It is in this sound, the cosmic word, that man's evolution has its origin, proceeding thence towards light, fire, and air. Only in the fourth condition does consciousness flash up in the spirit of man. From this point onwards, the directing force bestowed by the Logos has its rise from within man's own being, and his conscience becomes his rightful guide. His primordial being comes to expression in the I, the ego. The conscious ego is the realization in man of the Christ principle. And that is it. That is the end of chapter 15. I apologize, kind of stumbling over my words this morning a little bit. Still kind of dealing with this cold I got here, and yeah, anyway, not important, but that's about it for today, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. I've got a lot more to come. Probably, well, we're coming up on the 100 subscribers. I'm going to do that little book tour that I was talking to everybody about. Just go through and just show various books. Maybe get some ideas for ones to read in the future and whatnot. And then maybe we'll do a little giveaway like I mentioned too. I've got some extra pamphlets, Manly P. Hall, and various other authors. So I think that'd be kind of fun. Give something away at the 100 subscriber mark, and then we'll keep on going. We'll keep building the community, and hopefully it becomes like a cool little study group. All right, guys, that's it for now. Take care. I may post another one a little bit later. Maybe not. I said that yesterday, and then I didn't get around to it, but here's chapter 15 anyway, and 16 coming soon. All right, take care, everyone. Peace.